the ghost in her smile. My sister stole my future with a lie, so I took her wedding and turned it into my stage. I'm sitting in the silence of my own apartment for the first time, the keys still cold in my palm. The quiet here is different. It's not the heavy, watchful silence of my father's house, where every creak of the floorboard felt like a judgment. This silence is mine. It's been 3 years since the war began, 3 years since I understood that family isn't always blood, and blood isn't always family. My name is Anna. I'm 21, and to understand the crater where my family used to be, you have to go back to the spring I turned 18. My mother, Eleanor, died when I was 4. A car accident on a rainy highway. They said it was quick, that she didn't suffer. My father, Robert, never recovered. He was a kind man, a history teacher. But after she was gone, a part of him just checked out. He'd go through the motions, make my lunches, ask about school, help with homework. But his eyes were always somewhere else, fixed on a point in the past I couldn't see. We lived in a cozy, book-cluttered house near the university where he taught. It was just the two of us, an island of quiet grief. My grandparents on his side were kind but lived far away. Their visits were like gentle, fleeting breezes that couldn't stir the still air in our home. When I was 14, the island was invaded. Her name was Patricia. She was an events planner, vibrant and loud in a way that felt alien in our quiet world. Dad met her at a university fundraiser. I remember him practicing how to tell me, his hands fidgeting with a history textbook. Anna, I've met someone. She makes me laugh. I saw a flicker of the old him, the one I barely remembered, and that scared me more than anything. I said it was fine. What else could I say? Patricia came with a daughter, Bianca. Bianca was 16, 2 years my senior, and she entered our house like a queen surveying a newly conquered territory. She was all glossy hair, perfect clothes, and a smile that never quite reached her calculating blue eyes. I was shy, bookish, still dressed in comfortable, worn-out sweaters. Her first words to me were, "Oh, you're much smaller than I pictured." It was a statement, but it felt like a verdict. The bullying started subtly. A poison dripped slowly into my life. She'd reorganize my room, losing my favorite books or sketches. She'd sigh dramatically when I spoke at dinner. That's a unique opinion, Anna. She'd co-opt my friends, pulling them into her orbit with tales of parties and older boys, then casually imply I was boring, a prude, or that I'd said something cruel about them. She was a master of plausible deniability, always ensuring my father and Patricia only saw her polished, charming facade. To them, she was a perfect, popular daughter. To me, she was a warden. Her parents' divorce was messy, and she spent weeks with her father, a wealthy businessman in the city. Those were my reprieves. Dad would relax, the tension in his shoulders easing. We watch old documentaries and talk about history, those fragile moments where I could almost pretend we were still a duo. But Bianca's return was always heralded by a shift in the atmosphere, a tightening in Patricia's voice as she prepared to fuss over her. High school was a particular hell. We attended a large, sprawling campus, but she always found me, a shoulder check in the hall, a loud, pitying laugh in the cafeteria. Still eating alone, Anna? I could introduce you to some people, if you tried a little harder. I shrunk. I became a ghost in my own life, finding solace in the library and the art room. I never told Dad. I was convinced he'd choose her, choose a new, shiny family that seemed to pull him out of his shell. I saw the way he looked at Patricia, with a gratitude that felt like betrayal. Bianca left for a prestigious business school 2 states away when she turned 18. The relief was physical, a weight lifted from my chest. For the first time in years, I breathed. I started painting again, really painting. I made a couple solid friends in my art class. I even went on a few awkward dates. Life began to have color. Then my 18th birthday approached. Dad, to my shock and joy, decided to throw me a party. A proper coming of age, he said, with more enthusiasm than I'd seen in years. He knew I loved the Impressionists, so he rented a small gallery space downtown for the evening, hung with prints of Monet and Degas. He hired a string quartet to play classical pieces. It was thoughtful, specific to me. It felt like he truly saw me. The night was magical for the first 2 hours. My friends were there. My art teacher came. Dad was beaming, showing people around the exhibit, sounding proud. Bianca was there with her long-term boyfriend, Simon. I braced for it, but she was oddly quiet, clinging to Simon's arm, a small, secretive smile on her face. Then came the cake, a beautiful vanilla sponge with edible gold leaf, my favorite. Everyone gathered. The quartet began a soft rendition of Happy Birthday. I closed my eyes, ready to make a wish for a future away from the past. Wait! Bianca's voice cut through the music. Everyone turned. She stepped forward, that secretive smile blooming into full radiance. She took Simon's hand. Before Anna blows out her candles. Simon, and I have some news we just couldn't keep in. She paused, milking the moment. We're getting married. The room erupted. Squeals, cheers, a rush of bodies toward them. Patricia burst into happy tears, clutching Bianca. Dad stood frozen for a second. Then a huge, bewildered smile broke across his face as he clapped Simon on the back. The string quartet, confused, trailed off. I stood before my cake, the candles guttering, wax pooling on the gold leaf. The spotlight, so firmly on me moments before, had not just shifted. It had been violently ripped away and nailed to Bianca. One of her friends chirped, "Bianca, you should cut the birthday cake. For good luck." And she did, gliding over, taking a knife from my numb hand, her smile a blade twisting in my gut. The party wasn't mine after that. It was an impromptu engagement celebration. My wishes for college, my art, my future, all were drowned in chatter about venues and dresses. Dad was fully absorbed, talking excitedly with Patricia. He never once looked back at me, never saw the crumbling girl behind the melting cake. That night, a cold, hard stone settled in my chest. The passive ghost was gone. In her place was someone capable of wrath. The following years were a cold war. I snapped back at her barbs. We had screaming matches that left Dad and Patricia wringing their hands, uttering useless platitudes about sisterly love. They lived in a fantasy where we were equals, where the conflict was a two-way street. They refused to see the one-sided campaign of psychological terror that had preceded it. Bianca and Simon planned a lavish, year-long engagement. The wedding was to be a spectacle at a historic manor house. Every detail was obsessed over, every conversation at home dominated by it. The stone in my chest grew heavier, colder. I remembered the gold leaf cake, the dying candles, the utter invisibility. A plan began to form, not in a flare of passion, but in the icy, deliberate depths of my hurt. I talked to my boyfriend, Daniel. We'd been together since senior year. He was steady, kind, an engineering student with calm eyes and a quiet strength. I told him everything, the years of torment, the birthday, the simmering rage. He listened, his hand enveloping mine. "What she did was cruel," he said, his voice low and sure. "What do you need to do?" I told him my plan. He was silent for a long moment. "It's a grenade," he said finally. "It will blow up everything. But if this is what you need to be free, I'll stand with you. But let me do it right." He proposed his own plan, one far more dramatic than my vague idea of a simple announcement. The wedding day was a masterpiece of excess. Bianca was a vision in lace, floating on a cloud of entitlement. I wore a simple, elegant navy dress, determined to be a footnote. Daniel looked handsome in his suit, a silent pillar beside me. The ceremony was interminable. The reception began. Speeches were made, toasting Bianca's generous spirit and radiant heart. I felt nauseous. After the first dance, as the band struck up a popular tune, Daniel squeezed my hand and walked toward the bandleader. He said a few words, and the music faded. He took the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone. If I could have your attention for just a moment." The room turned. Bianca, flushed with happiness, looked puzzled. Dad and Patricia were smiling expectantly, perhaps thinking it was another toast. Daniel's voice was clear and warm. "I know this is Bianca and Simon's beautiful day, and we're all so happy for them." He paused, his gaze finding me in the crowd. "But being here, surrounded by the celebration of love, I just can't wait another second. There's someone here who has shown me what real strength is. Someone who has the most beautiful, resilient heart I've ever known." He began walking toward me. The room was utterly silent, a frozen tableau. Bianca's smile had stiffened into a grimace. Daniel reached me, went down on one knee, and produced a velvet box. The ring inside held a deep blue sapphire, surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Anna," he said, his voice echoing in the silent hall, "you are my future. Will you marry me?" For a split second, there was dead quiet. Then a wave of reaction, gasps, confused murmurs, and then, from my few friends and some distant relatives who knew my story, genuine applause and cheers. People rushed us. I said, "Yes." My eyes locked on Daniel's, but my peripheral vision caught the eruption at the head table. Bianca's face was purple with rage. She looked like she might vault across the room. Simon was holding her arm, his expression shocked. Patricia's hand was over her mouth. And my father stared at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated betrayal. The satisfaction that washed over me was dark and bitter, but it was potent. "Now, I thought, now you feel it." The fallout was nuclear. Dad called it dawn. His voice was a whip of fury. "How could you? You humiliated her. You stole her day. It was petty and vile. She stole my 18th birthday. I replied, my voice eerily calm. You gave it to her. You stood by and watched her do it for years. Where was this outrage for me? That was different. This was a wedding. And mine was a milestone you promised was mine. You failed me then. You're failing me now." The conversation spiraled into a vortex of old wounds. He accused me of jealousy, of always trying to start drama. I told him he had chosen a new daughter over his own a long time ago, when he said, "You need to ask my permission for such a stunt." I finally broke. "I don't need your permission for anything. You lost that right when you stopped being my father." I hung up. The silence from my family was absolute and heavy. Daniel was my anchor. We planned a tiny, sincere engagement party at our favorite riverside cafe. Only my maternal Aunt Clara came from the family side. The others cited flimsy excuses. It was a beautiful, quiet affirmation of our choice. Then the confrontation. A pounding on my apartment door a month later revealed the full tribunal: Dad, Patricia, Bianca, and Simon. Bianca launched into a screaming diatribe the second I opened the door, calling me every name in the book: a spoiled, jealous, pathetic worm who ruined her perfect day. She dismissed the birthday as a stupid cake. All her venom, usually so carefully sheathed, was on full display. I didn't back down. I screamed back, years of pain spewing out. We were two furies on the landing. Daniel held me, a solid wall at my back, while Simon tried to restrain Bianca. Dad shouted for us to stop, to apologize, to be the bigger person. I turned my fury on him. The bigger person? I've been the bigger person since I was 14. You don't get to preach. You allowed this. You enabled a bully because her mother gave you a life you preferred. You are a coward, and I am done." The words hung in the air. He flinched as if struck. The facade of the disappointed patriarch cracked, revealing something raw and ashamed underneath. Bianca, seeing the shift, snarled, "This was a waste of time. I knew you were trash." She stormed off, pulling Simon behind her. Dad and Patricia left soon after, his final attempt at a lecture dying in his throat. The silence they left behind was my freedom, freshly won and aching. A week later, I received an email from Dad. "Heard about your engagement party from Clara. Congratulations. I wish I could have been there. I am sorry it has come to this." It was all non-apology and self-pity. I wrote back 2 words. "Thank you." The real proposal, Daniel's proposal, had happened weeks before the wedding. He'd taken me to the art museum, to my favorite room of impressionist paintings. Under the soft glow of a Monet water lily scene, he'd asked me, simply and privately, to share my life with him. The wedding spectacle was a performance, a calculated piece of theater for an audience of one. My family. Our love was a quiet, real thing that happened in a museum, not the bomb we detonated in a manor hall. I am 21 now. The ache is still there, a dull phantom pain for the father I needed and never had. But it is no longer open wound. It's a scar I carry, a reminder of what I survived. I live in my own quiet apartment with my canvases and my books. Daniel is here most nights, a warm, steady presence. We are planning a small wedding, just us and the people who truly see us. I am learning that family is not a title bestowed by blood, but a bond forged in respect and kindness. I am building mine one brushstroke, one honest day at a time,